Earlier this year, I interviewed Kate and Jay from Ecotech Marine. If you want to see that interview in full, then see the link below. Today, though, we'll be looking at 5 tips for when you're using an Ecotech Vortech pump. Radiant. Anything in terms of Vortech that you kind of tips other than what we talked about, cleaning, making sure we maintain them, don't use too much of an aggressive cleaner, I would say. Certainly on the Vortex helps their longevity. Is there anything
Yeah,
else?
I mean, mount them properly is going to be the biggest thing because
Use
those
the
dry
tab.
side, you the hanging tabs, have the wire go up because seen so many times and times again, snail gets in there, jams up the wet side, the dry side continues to run, it falls off the tank and decouples. Anything along those lines. If the dry
Cats.
side falls, cats,
Cats
anything
are a
like that,
nemesis.
dry side's going to be the most expensive part to replace. So, I mean, just properly install it and just protect yourself, protect your equipment. I mean, that's going to be the biggest thing. Vortex have been out forever. I don't personally think there's any new tips or tricks or secrets to them. But other than that, I think
I mean,
that's
I think one of the other things is using the random modes
yeah,
is a big benefit of a
yeah,
Vortec, and really any power head if it has that capability. Simply because we all know that like it's crazy when you switch over to those modes after you've been running the same mode, even a mode that has some variation to it, like a pulsing mode. But you switch to a random where you start to get different movement in the tank, you will just see that detritus come out of
oh,
everywhere.
Absolutely. Yeah.
you change your
And
yep.
and obviously getting rid of that is just, I mean, that's just a big benefit, and that's one of the things which was originally one of the major drivers of people loving the Vortec was the mode variation, and the sync anti-sync for that same reason was to just completely change the water flow direction in the tank because it clears up. So there's just a huge amount of
Yeah.
functionality in Vortex which I don't think people really
Utilize.
utilize that much. And just taking some time, that's one where playing with it is not going to hurt your tank the same way
Lighting.
that messing too much with your lighting, what on an established tank is going to do.
Yeah.
So it's worth investigating because I mean we put all that stuff in there because I mean it made sense. People liked it, and
Don't be afraid to change your flow essentially and just play around with it.
I would agree. So I use maybe 5 or 6 during the day. The one I like the most is the wave. And you have to kind of set it. So I've got a 3-foot tank with 2
Wave.
MP40s at one end, and it's just at the right level. That's kind of about half an inch from the top, and you're thinking this is going to go over, and it doesn't. And then what I do overnight, I sometimes put it on a crest mode and turn it up really high for 30 minutes because a lot of the LPS have then shrunk because those corals that don't like a lot of flow, actually they'll shrink at night anyway, so therefore you blast it doesn't affect them, but then that's when you can get the detritus, I find, at night, because obviously there's less coral out and therefore you've actually got more space for the wave maker to push the water around. So I do that for about half an hour,
Really
quite
good
high,
idea.
that I wouldn't do during the day because the corals will absolutely hate it and they get absolutely, a lot of them they don't mind being battered, should we say, but others that I find have got scolly, if that gets a little bit too much it starts retracting.
Yeah.
So some, and bubble corals hate a lot of flow as well. So at night the bubbles are hardly out because if you on a bubble coral too much flow and they burst. So I think understanding your corals, and then night's a great time I think to turn up the flow, and a lot of the fish, I mean the fish don't worry about it anyway, other than pipefish and those
Yeah,
kind of.
I think that's kind of the biggest thing. It's just flow in general. I think the general public is afraid of flow. I don't think a lot of people use enough flow in their tank. Obviously, when you're talking about the people who understand reef tanks, yeah, they're not afraid of flow. But I think the general public, when it comes to the reef tanks, they're definitely afraid of flow. And a lot of tanks that I see are underflowed. So,
I'll use Sanju's tank again as an example. Is that particularly with the acroporas and the hard corals, is they'll take pretty much as you can give them to the
Yeah.
point where he had coral the last time we visited his tank that actually grows around the flow. So it's like, okay, too much flow, and it just keeps growing, and just it grew
Yeah,
like circle
that's
around the
yeah.
around which and that's because he runs everything at 100%. But yeah, I mean, and I think you kind of summed it up with livestock. It's looking at it, right? It's just taking a look and being kind of
aware.
common sense about what it is. But also to your point though, is that oftentimes even a small locational change in the tank even from a flow perspective, can be quite significant. So oftentimes, by moving the power head slightly, you can actually run it higher and still accommodate some of your lower flow coral. But I really like your suggestion about changing it up at night, particularly for carbon dioxide exchange too.
Yeah, absolutely. That water movement on the top, which breaks the surface, which helps as well, especially at night when pH and the oxygen essentially drops in your tank. And I think also we talk about flow and coral, but if people have got tangs and other, there are some tanks like Achilles tank. There's someone I know that's got an Achilles tank, absolutely loves lots of flow, and if it doesn't have as much flow, it gets more aggressive because of where it comes from. They're in really high intensity waves. So I think from a fish perspective, understanding and how you mix it up, and you might, having a pipe fish and a lot of flow doesn't always work, but having a tang with lots of flow is almost a certainty if you want to try. You can't eradicate, but trying to take that aggression level down. But of course, then you need to feed more because they're expending more energy. So again, it's that whole thing around the ecosystem and how do you balance it as much as you can. That you say it's a little bit of the ocean, but the reality is it's completely false. And we're just trying to replicate it, and then how do you best do that? So I think flow and fish is not talked about that often, but it's really important in certain types of fish that they get sufficient flow to help them survive, I would say.
Yeah, keep them, like you said, the stress levels, everything like that. I mean, just understanding flow of fish, and again, understanding your livestock in general as a whole with your flow, and even understanding how to like place your flow. I mean, Vortex are one of those unique ones with placement. It's people always ask, they're like, "Where's the best spot to put my Vortex?" Like, there isn't really a good answer to that because it really depends on everything. Like you said, your fish, your coral, your rock structure, your substrate. Do you have fine substrate? Do you have coarser substrate? What kind of return pump are you running? Okay, you're not running a powerful return pump. Let's put it up higher on the surface to get that water agitate. Like, there's so many different
But all that aside, wherever you can get the longest run unobstructed is basically the truth for any power head, including Vortex.
Because you can just get that stirring up. You've got the opposite at the sink, and then sometimes if you've got two rocks, they're kind of scapes there, you got there, they can crash and you can get it in the middle. So I think you then play, and the rock scape plays a massive part in that can create the flow or block the flow completely. That's arguably the thing that influences it more, and of course in the corals, because that acts just as an extension of the rock scape, doesn't it, I suppose, in that respect. Okay, I think that's it in terms of products. So thank you very much.